What is up, everybody? It's Drew from the Drew Experience. We are back. And if you like the conversations, whether it's on Canadian politics with conservatism or geopolitics with Canada and Iran, make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe button to my channel on YouTube. It's free, it takes 2 seconds. And if you really feel generous, I do have Buy Me a Coffee to help support conservative independent media in Canada, helps fund production costs, amongst other things. But most important, my guest today is one of the biggest heavy hitters ever in Canadian politics. He led the Canadian Alliance. He then became one of Prime Minister Stephen Harper's most valuable ministers when it comes to international relations and trade. He's also served in the Alberta government, and when it comes to economic policies and issues, they come to him for advice. I'm joined by the one, the only, the legend himself, Stockwell Day. Welcome to the show, Mr. Day.
Great to be with you, Andrew. Thank you for all that exaggeration, but as a recovering politician, I'll take it. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, how's everything been for you? Because you've been quite busy. You've been doing your podcast. By the way, make sure to check out what's the, I listen. I have the names. I always
Stockwell
forget.
Day-to-Day News, we'll get them there. Stockwell Day-to-Day News, yeah.
I'll get them there. And so I met you at the convention. How's everything been for you since you've been going around to places?
Yeah, there is lots going on. And I just got back from Oklahoma. I was down there last week. They wanted me to come. I was at the state capitol there, meeting with elected people. They were very interested in what's happening in Canada and wanted some updates, even on things like freedom of speech, some of the legislation federally that Canada has right now that's problematic. A conference coming up next week in Calgary about how to handle your money. So, yeah, lots of fun stuff going on.
That's amazing. So, obviously your story is very interesting. You were working with the then Reform Party under the Preston Manning, and then you guys did a rebrand and took over. There's a lot to say there, but if you could give the concise version, because your time is super valuable, sir. How did you get involved with politics and then eventually becoming leader of the Reform? I mean, or the Alliance, as I say.
Yeah, the Alliance. Yeah, that's the correction there. I never was. I mean, I worked with Reform Party and the MPs and Preston Manning on things. I was never a member of the Reform Party because at that time I was a member of the legislature in the province of Alberta. I was Minister of Finance there. And the view was across the country that because there was a Reform Party and because there was at that time a Progressive Conservative Party federally, the two would split the vote. Reform would traditionally take the West, the Progressive Conservatives would take some of the East, and the Liberals would keep dancing up the middle. So a number of us launched on a project related to trying to bring the two parties together. The plan was to actually crater the two legacy parties and form a brand new party. And Preston Manning, to his credit, oversaw the reform part of that. They folded up the Reform Party and we began the Canadian Alliance. We appealed to Joe Clark, who was member of the Progressive Conservatives at the time, to please also join because we felt an election was coming soon. He was, stubbornly wanted to hold on to the old Progressive Conservative Party. And then, so I won a seat in a by-election. I won the leadership of the Canadian Alliance. Jean Chrétien quickly called an election. So the new party, the Canadian Alliance, even though we were competing against the still standing Progressive Conservatives, we did increase the number of seats. We increased the number of votes across the country. We had record fundraising. I wound up, when the dust had settled, being leader of the opposition. Then there was another couple years of all kinds of challenges and turmoil and everything else. And finally, we folded up the Canadian Alliance and the Progressive Conservative folded up. And Stephen Harper and Peter MacKay at that time, who was with the Progressive Conservatives, basically ran for the leadership. There were others also. Stephen Harper then won the leadership of the new party. We told the Progressive Conservatives they had to drop that progressive name, and the rest was history. Stephen Harper, then we went into an election right after that under the new party, the new Conservative Party, with Stephen Harper as leader. The Liberals won that next election under Paul Martin, but Stephen Harper again continued to increase the number of seats. And then a couple more elections that were minority elections, and finally Stephen Harper got a majority in 2011. There's all the history you need to you need to know. But if you want to drill deeper into any of that, just fire away.
Perfect. So I wanted to ask you because, when you came in, I always felt from when I've studied my history, because I have a degree, because I did take some political science and all that. I always felt, by the way, Mr. Day, do I refer to you as Stockwell, or do you prefer Mr. Day? Because, I don't want to be disrespectful.
Call me Stockwell. I really like your excellency, but nobody will run with it. So call me Stock or call me Stockwell.
All right, Stockwell, if you insist. So, Stockwell, I want to ask, because when you came in 2000, it was a big deal. A lot of people felt this is the moment that the Chrétien dominance is over. And I feel if the progressives then could have made a deal, I've heard stories about how there was let's figure out a way to work together. How do you feel a Stockwell Day mandate would have looked like had you won in 2000?
Well, we made great progress in that election. We actually brought the progressive conservatives down to only 13 seats.
Mhm.
So they barely managed to even have official status. And yeah, if Joe Clark had come alongside and joined arms, it would have been a different story. The main issue was to try and bring these parties together and to quit splitting the conservative vote. So I really felt what I had to do was continue to reach out, continue to bring parties together, despite the fact that you get all kinds of infighting and everything else. Then when Stephen Harper and I then ran against each other for the Canadian Alliance a couple years later, he won. There was five of us running. He came first. I came second. But as Wayne Gretzky said, the Olympic team, Canadian Olympic team, got the silver. He was being congratulated, and they said, "Congratulations, you won the silver." And he said, "No, I lost the gold." So, but one of the things that I felt really important to do, I really insisted that everybody who had been supporting me, all of the MPs, and of course the tens of thousands of people across the country, we all had to pull together. We had to stop this silly thing of conservatives always getting so high and mighty on one principle here, one principle there, and then splitting the party. So I think what I was able to bring was that insistence that we all pull together, or has once been said by someone from another country, if we don't all hang together, we will all hang separately. We hung together and we eventually won. I think I was able to bring, with the help of many people, of course, some of the views, some of the things I had learned when I was Minister of Finance in Alberta, some of the lessons I'd learned when I was Minister of Social Services, and also working with Aboriginal groups. So, everybody brings experience that's unique to them, and I think I was able to bring that to the table, along with a lot of other really hardworking, smart people who did the same. We eventually, under Stephen Harper's leadership, we eventually got the job done.
That's amazing. I do remember how pivotal you were in those early Harper years, establishing trade relations. You were going abroad internationally. What led you to what influenced your views on a strong foreign policy, especially in a changing world where we see nations like China, Russia, and the Islamic, I say the occupied country of Iran. I'm half Iranian, as you know, and I'm a fierce advocate for Iranian freedom. So, what influenced your views in your time as a Minister of International Trade under Prime Minister Harper to say, okay, this is how we need to manage our role in this world?
Well, thanks for that question. Just prior to being Minister of International Trade, before that, I was Minister of Public Safety. So that involves not just the prisons and the National Police Force, but involves working with your intelligence services. That's where I was really working, with countries around the globe, especially on
Mhm.
security issues, intelligence sharing. Some of the countries we work with may even surprise some people that they wouldn't necessarily think we'd be allied with. But there are countries, all countries are concerned about the advancement of terrorism, especially radical Islamist terror. So the combination of what I learned, the importance of building trust, and that was on the security related issues, that actually was able to carry over into international trades. Between the two of those, building the trust where you can sit down with another country, you can sit down with another leader, build that trust, see what you can do either to work together for security reasons or work together for trade reasons. And I found that really seeing people as human beings, taking them at face value, but letting them know that, we're not here to play games, we're here to get serious. When I chaired the cabinet committee on Afghanistan, going to Afghanistan twice, doing 2 missions there, but not missions like our soldiers. I was with our troops. They refused to give me a firearm while I was over there. You really do get to see, and Afghanistan is a good example. You're dealing with the Taliban, and you really get to see that you can't just assume that another culture is going to think like your culture. There were many times in dealing with some of the officials that we had to deal with in Afghanistan. Some of them you could trust, and some of them, honestly, you just felt like you couldn't trust them as far as you could throw them. And people's lives are at stake. So relying on your own intelligence personnel and relying on what's actually happening on the ground, getting out there to see it yourself. You can't depend on your officials. All of that combines to doing everything you can to really get an assessment of what's going on, and then with confidence bringing forward your best advice and your best suggestion on how you move forward, whether it's moving forward in Afghanistan to a new battle area, or whether it's moving forward in a trade deal with South Korea, for instance, that we did, where you both give up something, but you are determined that the net gain for both countries is also better. So diplomacy and negotiations, they can be win-win. They don't have to be seen as win-lose. You look for the points of congruence and you press on.
That's amazing. I want to ask you too about the Iran situation. It's something that's that a lot that I've been very eager to ask. You know the fire that I have when we met at that Shabbat dinner at Calgary. By the way, the convention was amazing. I couldn't believe you were sitting behind me. I was like, oh man, that's Stockwell. You know what led to Prime Minister Harper's philosophy of taking such a hardline stance, whereas today's administration, it's just words, it's not action. Whereas under the Harper government that you were under, Prime Minister Harper took, some could have disagreed. It was a little too harsh because it had other ripple effects. But what influenced the Conservative Party to say this is a rogue nation that Canada will not do any work with until the government changes?
You know, you have to, we talk about taking people at their word. When there is a regime, when there is a country, or let's say a leadership that says they want to kill you, and when everything they do proves they want to kill you, including how they're killing your allies, you need to take that seriously. And you need to realize they're not fooling around. And we had recognized for a long time that the Iranian regime, I mean, I'd done visits to Iran. I met with people there who were, this is, back a number of years, but they were terrified of the regime. We saw on the ground, we met with people whose family members had been kidnapped, family members had been killed by the regime, and we realized this is a very serious situation. And some of those early days of meeting with Iranian leadership, I realized if this nation ever got access and had their hands effectively on nuclear weaponry, we would be their countries near them, and especially Israel, would be in a very serious situation. We also knew and felt that Iran would not just direct their ire towards Israel, but they would to other nations also. And all of that is coming now to fruition. We see it. Personally, I was disappointed through the Obama years when he took a conciliatory approach to Iran, and I would argue even with cash transfers helping them establish their own military capabilities. And that's why it's a concern to me now, Drew. I can tell you, when I see the reluctance in the EU, for instance, and I met with many of the leaders of EU countries to go shoulder to shoulder to stop the Iranians from the Iranian, when I say the regime, I mean the leaders. The Iranian people are very different. But it's much like the Soviet Union rule back in the 30s. The IRGC, you can dispute what the actual numbers are, hundreds of thousands, maybe a million. They're in every city, they're in every town. They vary effectively by killing people in the public square, by hanging people from cranes, by disappearing people overnight. You can keep, there's 90 million people there. You can keep millions of people under subjection when you have that kind of brutal rule. So to me, it's a matter, as I said at the start of my remark there, when people say they want to kill you, you should probably take them very seriously. And when you watch them killing others, you should take that seriously too.
That's amazing. Now, also, as we see now, this revolution is different because it's the age of social media. You've seen the protests. I'm sure you've probably been to some because you have many Iranian friends. You're very well versed on the history yourself, as we were talking. And it seems like the people have come behind a leader finally. It's the Shah's son in exile. And I think you have something crazy to say because when we met, I'm gonna let you say the story. It's your words, not mine. And I think this is. I think you should say because I think you're so well versed, and I want to ask you to give your thoughts on the individual you met.
Well, I've met the Shah's son. I met him on two occasions in Washington, D.C., once in Mar-a-Lago. And the conversations that we had convinced me, and I don't think I'm being naive on this. He obviously wants to see the type of a thriving society return to Iran that could return. I really do believe him when he says, if, I mean, if, and we hope that the leadership falls, we'll see if that happens. He mainly wants to see a democratic reality and a prosperous society return there. And he's saying it doesn't have to be him. If he can be a part of that, if he can urge that on, but it doesn't have to be him. He has seen the reality of what this type of brutal rule does. He's convinced that the numbers are there in terms of people who also want to, it's overwhelming in terms of the majority that wants to see a change in Iran, but they are constantly in the streets of the cities of the towns. They are all staring down the barrel of guns 24/7. So this is going to be a real challenge.
That's very true. And so that's amazing. You said that you're going to win a lot of supporters on your ex, by the way. Now, I guarantee you after this, when this interview airs, because of that, you're going to get like thousands of new followers. And then I'm going to get some DMs. Hey, when are you going to bring Stockwell into your X spaces to talk about this? And I'm like, okay, well, I got to ask him. He's a busy guy, but I'm sure we'll make it happen. But that's amazing, Stockwell, that you understand the history of Iran, the mistakes of 1979, especially with how the West treated the Shah. And if I like to call it the Mullah Wall, like, the Berlin Wall, the Mullah Wall, the
Sure.
human capital that you must have seen through Iranians. Once Iran is free, what kind of human capital do you think a free Iran could give Canada and the US specifically once the people are free and able to showcase their talents?
That's a great question because, of course, I've met and know many Iranian people that I've met in Canada and the US and in Europe. And actually being there under the regime, being in Tehran and meeting with just so many people, you recognize instantly the spirit of the people of Iran. They are, a generous people, smart, wanting to work hard, wanting to see freedom returned. I just have great hope for them. And the whole region will just change dramatically because, as you know, Iran, the regime, even though it's severely curtailed right now, funding terrorism around the world. Hezbollah, funds to the Houthis. There's no question when Iran gets choked, the leadership gets choked off, and all that funding gets choked off. The amazing effect of stability and peace, first out of the Middle East, and then even broader than that, is going to be substantial. Again, that's why it's so disturbing and concerning to see countries that should know better, countries like in the EU, they should be linking arms with the effort, for instance, to make sure the Strait of Hormuz is open. They should be linking arms in terms of saying there is no way we can have a pariah state like Iran have access to a nuclear weapon. When you have a state that is theologically bound and theologically driven, and when the leaders are convinced that they are part of a prophetic, heavenly prophetic motion to be the ones to incinerate other nations. And even if it means they get incinerated themselves, you're not dealing with rational people. I mean, I can sit down, as I have in the past, with countries which would, let's say, not be our allies, but they are rational. And when you are dealing with people who are irrational, who can't wait until they have the power to completely vaporize their adversaries, it's a very different world. So watch for some fabulous things. I'm not trying to use hyperbole here, to happen. Already, of course, you've seen the UAE has they've opted out of OPEC. They've moved out of that. OPEC, I think, is at the a place of crumbling. We're talking about the petroleum producing countries there. I think we are on the cusp of seeing some amazing breakthroughs in the Middle East, and that's why it's frustrating and it's concerning. Mainstream media, which basically is culturally Marxist in their worldview, is the main source of sustenance of morale building for the regime in Iran. The regime in Iran, all they do is they keep watching the mainstream media, reading the headlines, and seeing the constant pressure against the U.S. And right now, it's a game of chicken that's going on. They just think that the Trump administration will fold because they've got the midterm elections coming. They think they just have to wait it out. But when I say a game of chicken, they are absolutely running out of resources at a phenomenal rate. There's questions about how much longer the people they can even be fed. We know the oil, of course, is choked off, but when you have countries like China that aren't getting oil from Iran anymore, the noose is tightening, and it's the only thing that's propping them up and keeping, well, two things that are keeping them from throwing in the towel. It's their own fanatical and psychopathic religious belief, along with this notion that they're getting from most media in the West that they can actually outlast the U.S. History will show how it was Western media really that helped to prolong this incredible and this dangerous situation.
Well, that's amazing how you said. You just basically took the words out of my mouth and out of how a lot of Iranians and the Canadian Iranian diaspora feel. And we do feel left alone. And I want to just say too personally, we want to thank you for how like valiant you are. You were always trying to give facts in your show. So make sure to follow his show day to day with Stockwell Day on all platforms. I have to ask this because then people are going to say you didn't ask this and whatnot. Because you said you were in Iran, and that I have to ask, that was under the Khatami regime, right? When it
That
was
would be correct. Yeah.
okay. And what led to that? Was that like something that Harper, Prime Minister Chrétien or Harper was like sending the opposition to kind of like feel out what Iran was like? What was the significance of that?
That particular mission that we were on, it was actually a group of MPs, and the group that I think there was two or three others. One of the things that we were wanting to do was just get our heads around what was Iran thinking, what was going to be the future. This was post 9/11. There was all kinds of speculation on who actually wants to see the United States evaporated, who wants to see Canada evaporated. And one of the things I learned there in meeting, even in that day with members, I'll call it the legislature, they use that loosely in terms of their understanding of democracy. But a number of those people say, give me their cards and saying, please keep in touch with us. Please keep emailing us because the leadership, if they think we've got a vibrant email pipeline going to Canada and to the US, they said it actually increases the chances that we'll be left alive or at least left in power. And it was very disconcerting over the next several months to one by one not get any emails back and to realize something's been choked off there. But that was the purpose, really, to try and say to the regime itself, what do you want? Is there any possibility of working in concert with one another? We're not out to overthrow another country. How is there any chance that we can work peacefully, even though we have strong differences? And I came away from that particular mission of the view that no, it was going to be impossible to work with that regime in place. They were intent on certain prophetic unctions that they had, and nothing was going to stop them other than being thrown out or defeated.
Very true. That's amazing. Thanks for that story. That goes to show how important to understand the beast we're dealing with. So to take it to Canada now and focus on domestic. Look, guys, his time's valuable. I mean, we got to make the most of it. And if he comes on for round two, great. For Canada, I mean, you've seen what's happened after Prime Minister Harper, the decade of decline. Then we had the pandemic, and obviously Prime Minister Trudeau did some pretty crazy, and being polite about it, decisions that hurt us economically and freedom too, such as like with what happened during the pandemic. Mistakes were made. Then you had the Freedom Convoy. What, as someone who loves freedom and loves who values it, Stockwell, what was your thoughts on that decade of decline, with how it would eventually end with the pandemic and the Freedom Convoy and the use of the Emergencies Act? What was your thoughts on that? I know it's a tough question, but it's something that I wanted to ask, considering that you are very, very pro freedom of choice for Canadians, since we're supposed to be living in a free country.
It was disappointing to me because I knew Justin Trudeau. I won't say we were best friends, but we certainly knew each other. At one time,
Mm-hmm.
we each had a condo in the same building. We were in the House of Commons together. And as disappointed I was that people bought into the promise he was making in 2015, which got him elected, I honestly did not think he would veer so far to the left. I knew, of course, he was left leaning as his father was. I just didn't think he would do the same type of freedom evaporating policies that he took. I was a bit surprised. It was a decade of decline, and when people, and it continues, unfortunately, because when you look even at something like inflation, and I repeat often for people, look, there's a number of reasons that we see inflation. The single greatest reason for inflation, the single greatest cause, is government spending borrowed money. And I try and repeat that to people like a mantra. Yes, there's other factors, and certainly there are now with what's going on in Iran, but governments of any party, of any stripe, governments spending borrowed money is the single greatest cause for inflation. It reduces your buying power, it reduces the power of your dollar, whether you're buying groceries, gas, or down payment on a house. And unfortunately, Prime Minister Carney, yeah, we had some hopes, and not that we had evidence for it, but as a previous banker, we had hoped that he would understand you've got to be very aggressive on wrestling down the deficit. You've got to be aggressive on wrestling down the debt. I'd lived through the years 93 to 95. I was a minister in Alberta at the time. And people forget the International Monetary Fund in 1995 actually said to Canada, with the Liberals at that point in government, Chrétien was the leader and Paul Martin was his finance minister, IMF saying that we could hit the day where we would be defaulting because the rate of money, it's just like a government borrows money, it's just like an individual. You get to a place where if you borrow so much money, your credit cards max out and you can't borrow anymore. And it's a strong metaphor for governments. You go around the world to try and attract bonds, but what you have to pay the bondholders in terms of interest just to get them continuing to give you money, it's hugely problematic and you lose your buying power with it. So I'm disappointed that Prime Minister Carney has not been more aggressive on that. Very disappointed also with his foreign policy. Look, I mean, I understand the fight with the US. My understanding of economics, I don't like tariffs. I don't think you can make a strong case where it helps your economy. I could see it maybe in a time of extreme warfare, and so you're going to tariff your enemy's goods. But I'm very opposed to tariffs. Having said that, it's not a reason to jettison a partnership and an ally that has existed since our country was formed. To be, I've warned for months now, and people can check my website on this, that if you snuggle, Canada keeps snuggling closer to China, you're going to lose the trust of your closest ally, which is the United States. And I've been warning and saying, you'll get to a point, because when I was Minister of Public Safety, and as I said, would go to the U.S. often, or they would come up and we exchange security files. We've been looking at individuals who pose a danger to our countries. I've spent time at the CIA and looked at their operation, and I can tell you, Drew, when they think, they don't care who the country is, if they think you're drawing too close to their enemies, they stop sharing information with you to the same degree that they had been when they trusted you. And unfortunately, what I predicted on that front has come true. You've seen over the last couple of days the U.S. coming out, they're withdrawing from the board, withdrawing us from the Board of Defense. Vital information for us to have. And that information, that intelligence that source of it being choked off now because of the push towards China. So those are, I think, the biggest factors in terms of like you say, a lost decade. I'll call it a decade of policy decadence, where on the policy side, we have frayed relations now. We've chosen, apparently, to draw closer to a country that has no problem, locking down a million of its citizens. We're talking about China. We're talking about the Uyghurs. No problem arresting Canadians and throwing them in jail. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And so that decade of policy decadence is definitely hurting us. We're suffering from it. We need the Liberals to either change their way, or we need them to be changed.
Exactly. What's your thoughts on the Conservative Party? Obviously, the last election was like I thought we had it, and I say that as we because I'm a conservative like you. I'm always going to vote conservative no matter what. A lot of mistakes happened. It was a learning mistake. I don't want to dwell on the mistakes, but now in the present day, how do you feel about the Conservative Party today under Pierre Poilievre? What do you feel they should to do to focus in order to get Carney to live up to his word? And then also, if the moment comes, how can Pierre win? Because it's funny, I read his book by Andrew Lawton, and he was one that I think supported you actually when he was a young up and comer. So that's so I think so I could say maybe that Pierre is a student of the master himself, Stockwell.
Well, I don't know about the master status, but I brought Pierre to Ottawa. He interned for me in 2000 when we were running and just starting the Canadian Alliance. He was fantastic in our campus outreach. Smart guy, knew how to articulate the issues. Came and worked for me in Ottawa. Went on to become a member of Parliament. The rest is history. Smart guy, understands what can make a country successful, what makes an economy strong, what makes an economy weak, and he got hit by a convergence of history where Trump came out, and liberals, of course, have always had, and this goes back to our founding, always had significant dislike for the United States. And that materialized. And then you have the convergence of mainstream media. And if it sounds like I'm picking on media, mainstream media, I am, but with justification, because the mainstream media in Canada is significantly culturally Marxist. That means they really embrace the mindset, the worldview of what small m Marxism embraces. And that there's among that of which, for instance, there is no God. So kick God out of the equation. And then there's really the family is a human-made construct. So you don't need the family. And if you don't need the family, you certainly don't need private family homes and private property. And really, what you need is a few really smart elite people running the show. That is classical Marxism, cultural Marxism, and that particular mindset has a complete hold on virtually the entirety of the Canadian media scene. So anything that they hear and it's in the academy too, obviously in the universities. So when somebody comes espousing another view, they see that as a threat to the utopian perfection that they want to bring into being, and so they will react negatively against anything, let's say, a small c conservative is saying. So Pierre has fallen a victim of time and circumstance with what happened with Trump. Completely irrational how Canadians responded. Not irrational to be responding against the tariffs. And we should be fighting that. But to reject the wholesale relationship with the United States is bizarre. And what's happening now to him with people crossing the floor, very unfortunate. I know what it's like to have a mutiny in the ranks. It is not fun. I do think it's right that constituents are here. In one of the cases, at least, they're suing the MP. And listen, those people who crossed the floor did it for one reason. They got elected narrowly under the Conservative flag. They see the polls bumping upwards for Mark Carney, and they say to themselves, you know what, if I'm going to get reelected, I think I'd rather be running as a liberal. And so, in a profound disgrace to the democratic process, they reject the ones who voted for them and bail out. But that's very tough for a leader, very tough for Pierre Poilievre, because it looks like it's not a matter of people losing faith in him. It's they're losing faith in themselves of getting reelected in their own constituency. And so they jump ship. I think he'll be able to withstand this. He got very high marks, very high percentages at the convention earlier in the year. And he has demonstrated he can be tough and he understands these things, but he is going daily, 24/7. He is fighting a mainstream media, culturally Marxist media, who are telling another story. And unfortunately, people are buying that story for now. We'll see if the downward spiral of our economy wakes people up or not. We are hearing and we know for a fact, I meet with investors every day internationally. They say, we just don't feel good about investing in Canada right now with those present economic policies. So we'll see. It's usually economics that wakes people up when they really see that it's policies, government policies, high taxation, and insane regulation. They will vote for, as we say, the other guys and the other girls. And that's Pierre just has to keep hitting the message and keep waiting for the time and see what materializes.
Amazing. Amazing. I love everything you said there. You laid it on the line and whatnot. Whether people agree with it or not, I agree with it because I think he's a great leader. I got involved in politics because of him. And it's funny, when he lost, that's how I learned more about you. And then that's when I started looking up your profile, and a lot of your economic views are with me. Like, I became an economic hawk because of you. Listen, I'm what's called, by the way, I hate the term red Tory. fed up with it. Okay, I'm what's called a light blue conservative, Stockwell. Like I'm for freedom. I'm for freedom. You want to do what you want to do, go ahead. Don't force stuff down my throat. Don't force me with your view. But I want responsible government. I want the money that I pay my taxes for spent responsibly and efficiently. And I think I'm for freedom of press. I think we need to have independent media, and I think we need to have that healthy ecosystem. And, in mainstream media, I listen, they have their reason to be, but it's not what it used to be. And I think you're right. I want to ask though, because as I said, I want it because the last question I have is, right now we're heading to. It looks like Canada's heading for some challenging times, but if Canada is to rebound and to live up to its economic potential to become the South Korea of the North, which we can do, how do you feel or how do you feel about the younger generation becoming more conservative and then getting into power as the years go by, and what the future of Canada holds with the latest trend?
I'm going to be cautious here. Just don't want to give a wrong view. I'm
No worries.
somewhat optimistic. I'm not over
Okay.
the top optimistic. And they say, as you know, the difference between an optimist and a pessimist is that the pessimist usually has more information. So I'm concerned because if unless there's two things that I've got a couple of flagship issues that I'm working with provincial governments are. One of them is the education system. Our education system is severely and significantly culturally Marxist. So we are raising kids from K to 12 and then into university who have an increasing view that everything is going to be solved by the government, that a few really smart elite people are what we need, that it's wrong to be innovative, that it's wrong to want to succeed, that we all should just sort of, be a happy holy huddle and not see any one person get ahead. It's wrong. We should be punishing people, especially who become wealthy, even though it's the wealth creators and the innovators who create jobs and create the taxes. So we've got a growing population, Gen Z, if you want to call it that are continually exposed to a completely false set of economic projections and economic studies. And so as people graduate and as their minds are actually attuned to hearing a culturally Marxist message, when they hear, the good news that a small c conservative message brings, especially a fiscal conservative message, they doesn't really resonate with them enough, with most, not all, to make them reconsider their vote. However, I will say about Gen Z and millennials to a degree, they're smart, and so, as they see the reality that the money that they do bring in is buying them less and less, and as they see their future is more and more at risk, they will be open to what we call a fiscal conservative message. But it's a real challenge. And so, one of the things I'm doing, encouraging provincial governments, is to establish a parallel track for people who want to be educated, for people who want to get degrees, or they want to get certificates, or they want to move on and become innovators. There needs to be a parallel track for them to get the types of qualifications they need, whether it's in science, whether it's in the STEM, the science and technologies, medicine, or whether it's in other areas. If we are relying and allowing the only path to certification or to a degree is through the teacher unions, then we are increasingly going to have smart young people who are browbeaten down and will not be able to respond to a message of freedom of enterprise, freedom to be innovating, freedom to create jobs. So that's my concern. We're actually in a race against time on that one. I'm encouraging ministers of education and even premiers to take a hard look at that. It's interesting, Drew, in Alberta, Premier Smith has just announced a program where tradespeople, and she used an example, let's say somebody works in the trades for 35 years, let's say they're an electrician, and they'd like to do something, they'd like to share what they've learned about business and about hard work with younger people. But the thought of going to university for a 5-year education degree, and again, being browbeaten by cultural Marxists, is daunting to them. So she's adopted a 6-month program now. You have a 6-month program where somebody can get a teaching diploma to teach in the area in which they've become expertise, let's say in the trade. So it's the first move in that direction. I can tell you the teacher colleges are going to go insane on that. The teachers' unions are going to go berserk. And I'm not saying we abandon the public system. If people want their kids to be culturally Marxist in their thinking, let them make that choice. But you must also, as a government, fund a parallel choice for those who don't want to be educated that way. So that's a somewhat long answer to, am I optimistic? Somewhat. And it's going to be based on this rising wave of smart young people being able to access a parallel system where they can hear that there are other factors in the universe other than Keynesian economics, for instance.
Amazing. Stockwell, that was amazing. We did it. We did a great 42, 43 minutes. And as you said, at a hard stop, 9 yet to stop. Where can people connect with you if they want to see what you're doing? Because you got a website, you got a podcast, you got an X page, and soon an Instagram page. I'm making this clear right now, people. I promised Stockwell, I shook his hand once. It's time. I'm going to be making sure I teach him about Instagram. We will not use TikTok. We have reasons for that, but I will teach Stockwell how to use Instagram to get his message out in reels. And I think he'd do great on it. So, Stockwell, where can people connect with you? Because, and if you ever want to come back on my show, you always have a platform here, my friend.
Well, you run a great show, so congratulations, Drew, for that. They can go at stockwellday.com. There's a ton of information, let's say, about me, a number of the things I've produced. I did a documentary. I was funded and sponsored to do a documentary into Israel following the October 7th collapse attacks. A lot of what I do gets suppressed because of the nature of what I say. When I release the documentary, it is available on YouTube, also on Spotify. You can find my news site. But YouTube put a disclaimer, for instance, on the documentary saying there were some areas of age inappropriate. And I said, what on earth is that? They say, well, talking about the violence that was perpetrated by Hamas, especially on the day of the attack, the killings, the young people that were killed, the rapes that took place. It wasn't age appropriate. And I said, man, the stuff you can watch on YouTube that is, we can classify as outrageous. So anyway, some of my stuff gets depressed. Woe is me. I'll keep crying about that. But I've actually just had somebody recently come forward. They say they want to, I'm fine with putting my content out there, but I am not, as people will see, I am not the most advanced on the tech side, even though my grandkids do give me lots of good advice. So we're looking at how we expand that, how we update that, how we get around some of the suppression techniques that are used by X and others. I keep telling Elon Musk to phone me so that he can deal with some of the people that are still on his site. Anyway, so StockwellDay.com. I am on X, Stockwell underline day, and the day-to-day news, Stockwell day-to-day news. And I appreciate the comments too. I get tons of comments on any of those, pro or con. I don't care. Anytime I'm getting feedback is an opportunity for me to improve.
That's amazing. Well, Stockwell, I really want to thank you for coming on. You've been a bit of I'd say, an inspiration for me and my views economically to become a fiscal conservative. Keep up the amazing work you do, and I look forward to seeing you at another convention and having you on again. If you ever want to share more of what you're doing, especially with what's going on in Canada, we need more of it. And I think with your experience and stories, it would help. So if you ever want to come on again, I'd love to have you if you're willing to come back on.
Honored to be invited. Let's find another time, and all the best in the good work you're doing in terms of spreading the news on how we stay free and how we avoid the chains that want to bind us. So thanks for doing that.
Well, guys, make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe button. Follow the legend himself, Stockwell. I'm Drew from the Drew Experience. Hit that like, share, subscribe. Drew Experience out.